You're listening to Up West Sports. I'm your host, Gavin Height, alongside my co-host, Kyle Knowles. Here's what we got on the docket today. Ryan Presley heads to the Cubs in a trade. Bregman's potential return to the Astros. Ichiro to the Hall of Fame. And we're going to dig a little bit more deeper into the Hall of Fame and what's going on. Kyle, we got some baseball stuff to talk. Let them know.
Baseball stuff! Baseball stuff!
Thanks, Gavin. So, some big news in MLB free agency. Ryan Presley gets dealt to the Cubs. Within that deal, the Astros are sending over some money. Obviously, they're not sending over all $14 million. There's been some conflicting reports if it's 6.5 of the 14, or are they giving 8.5 of the 14? All we know is they're saving money. Why is that a big deal? Well, obviously they're kind of in a conversation with Bregman. There's been all off season. There was an offer of, I believe the Astros offered 156 over 6. So you're looking about 26 million, average. Bregman and Boris have been looking at a 189.7, 27 million a year. So they're close. And I think maybe potentially it's that 1 year, or there might be more to it. And so, you look at that, and then you look at obviously their payroll and what they're looking at today. Obviously, when you're not looking at a sport that has a salary cap, it's kind of hard to determine what do they have left to spend or what they're going to spend. I mean, now if you're the Mariners and they tell you exactly what you're going to spend, potentially a little different. So based on the numbers, they ended the year last year with a $244 million payroll. Right now, Roster Resource has them at projected to be around just under 218, luxury tax sitting at 236. So you're looking at about $18 million in wiggle room before you start having to pay those luxury taxes. And so with Bregman, you're looking, okay, what's the number? Now we could get into deferments, and we talked about it last week, and that is a whole can of worms. So I think it'd be better we just kind of look at, okay, let's look at the contract as a whole. I think if you look at it from a incentive-laden deal that not only protects the Astros but also benefits, Alex if he does produce, I think it wins. And then beyond that, if you kind of build escalators into it. So if you kind of look at the graphic that I put together, we're looking at every 2 years, you're starting at 23 as your floor. You're looking at potentially $4 million in incentives. So that gets you that 27, which is one you wanted. Now, again, some of these are lofty, MVPs, Gold Gloves. Again, he was a Gold Glover last year. It was his first one. And then you look at plate appearances in the last, last 3 years. I mean, he's well crushing what I put together. He was an all-star twice. Who's to say he doesn't, pull that off again? And then, the Astros have been in the playoffs numerous years. Who's to say he can't pull these off? So you start looking at these numbers. Somewhere in there, you're going to have a team buyout. Totally understand. You could also have a player option. Does Alex want to kick into this? Does he not want to kick into this? Does he think, hey, I had such a good year. Your $2 million increase in this and this doesn't make sense to me. I can do better on maybe a short-term deal. But I think this is something that, you look at it over the course of 6 years. He's going to, if you look at that deal, he'd be finishing that season as a 36-year-old. Again, the incentives are there. I mean, 350 plate appearances, you get $1 million. I mean, clearly he's going to hit that. You'd hope based on what he does. But again, I think or maybe he doesn't at 36. I don't know how he's going to be at that point. But I think it's a deal that really works for both sides. Again, could be completely off, but I think it's something that is, hey, like, we'll give you the money if you produce or if you're healthy, which again, if you look at it, the last 5, 6, 7 years, while he's been healthy these last 3, there was a 3-year stretch where he was not healthy. And so, I look at it as a potentially a good deal on both sides. It's hey, we'll pay you for your production and if you're healthy. So, you're betting on yourself, but we're also then, but if you look at the plate appearances, he'll clearly hit those. So it's like they're giving him the money. But again, they're protecting themselves in the event he does get hurt and can't hit those marks. So, we get into that whole deferment, but that's a whole other day. So let's say the Astros do land Bregman. Or does he go somewhere else? Let's say, the Tigers land him. Or somebody else lands him. And there's some of these other teams that have some really good young infields. Well, you have Bregman to the fold. Now you've displaced one of those infielders. Is that something the Mariners maybe go after and it was enticing? I'd be curious if you've got a take on that. I think we've talked about it and you might have some people in mind.
Yeah, and honestly, I just I saw an article from Sporting News that he was linked to 189 million, which is what he was asking the Astros for the first time around, and they declined. I think they countered with 152 or 156, somewhere in the 150s, and
156 over 6.
156 over 6, correct? Yeah, and it was a year shy, and he turned that down. But he was linked on Sporting News. He was linked to another $180 million potential deal with the Red Sox. But yeah, as you laid that contract out, I really do think that it's a good contract on both sides, and it helps out the Astros probably the most. Because he's got to be held to those standards, and if he doesn't hit those standards, he doesn't get that money. It helps out the Astros more so than it helps out Bregman, but I think it is a W all around because on top of that, this is the team that he's born and raised with. He's been there the whole time, and there may be some loyalty in staying, maybe the hometown discount, as you call it. But yeah. If he goes to the Red Sox, which is one of the teams that he's linked to, if he goes to the Tigers, there's the infield becomes a little bit crowded, and not too crowded, but enough to where I think that's where the Mariners are waiting for. I think they're waiting for that to happen so they can make a move. Because I don't think Alonso, as much as I want it to happen, I don't think Alonso and Bregman are in the works to come to Seattle. I know we talked about it in our last segment, but unfortunately, it just looks like Jerry and company are probably not going to entertain that, barring just some crazy miracle. So when it comes to that, we're waiting for the chips to land, or I guess the chips to fall before the Mariners can make a move on a potential third baseman or a potential infielder. Tristan Casas has been linked to the Mariners in the past. Does that resurface? Does he make a jump over to the Mariners? And what does the infield look like with him? Now Solano's got to be able to kind of stay versatile, which he does. But at this point in time, can he play the left side of the infield? Can he give you a game or two? Maybe. Yeah, that's very plausible. But now you got to fight for Bliss, Dylan Moore, and Solano over at second base. And then I think Jerry's really the reason why Mitch Haniger hasn't been moved more so than it's tough to get rid of 17.5 million or 15.5, including all the other not incentives, the bonus that he got at the beginning of all this. If you're moving, it's tough to move that. And I think Jerry's actual plan is for Mitch to stay because he does have good numbers in Seattle. And I think he's really moving forward with Mitch in the fold. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him being a starter on day one. I don't see the longevity of it. But I think that he's going to give him and maybe Dylan Moore the chance to start and lose the opportunity. I think that's how he's going to move forward with those two guys is it's their position or their spot in the lineup to lose wherever they may be on the field. I doubt you see too much outfield work with Mitch now that you have a pretty set outfield at this point. Maybe he plays out there sparingly, but because you got Luke Raley, you don't really need that. But I did want to touch back on Ryan Pressly. Looking at his stats, I've heard rumors on him potentially being the closer. And that's kind of what they are looking at. They're paying $8.5 million or close to $8.5 million for, a 36-year-old that had, a 3.49 ERA, 4 saves. He didn't have really a tremendous year, and he's showing signs of regression at a rapid rate. A 3.58 ERA the year before. Now, ERA isn't everything. The FIP over the last 2 years is a 3.1 and a 3.36. It tells a little bit more of the story because those are, the independents. The strikeouts over the last 2 years. Go ahead. Yeah.
And I think that's what shows, honestly, if you look at this, I think the biggest tell of he got what he wants is the fact that he waived a no trade clause.
Yes. I agree that there was probably some form of a conversation to be had about, hey, you're going to be either our number one guy out of the pen when we get late into the game, or you're going to be our closer. Because looking over the last 2 years, he had 31 saves in 2023. He had 4 saves this past year. If that spells out anything, it doesn't really spell out, hey, he's going to be the closer, especially for a team that's trying to compete in a division that is up for grabs now that the Cardinals are kind of moving in the other direction. But I did want to touch on Ryan Pressly before moving forward, that it's still unknown what his exact role is going to be, or the longevity of said role. If he comes in and he has 2 bad outings as a closer, does he move out of the closer role? I'm curious on what those talks are going to be like. But then, yeah, kind of going back to the Alex Bregman and why we're kind of, really digging into Alex Bregman. Bregman, him going to the Astros obviously affects the Mariners. The Mariners are, they'd be not in trouble, but, the division continues to stay strong if he heads back to the Astros. And I really think that there's a good chance that he heads back to the Astros. But if he doesn't head back to the Astros, what does that mean for the Mariners? Well, like I said earlier, that means where the chips fall, the Mariners could then go get the scraps, which tends to be Jerry's MO. That tends to be what he ends up doing, is he waits for other pieces to fall, and then he tries to pick up what's left behind for a little bit cheaper, trying to play the best money ball he possibly can in 2025. With that being said, that kind of moves us into what we wanted to talk about with Bregman. What do you think the chances are? We're going to play a little game here. What do you think the chances are that Bregman lands back to Houston? We'll go with a percentage. What percent do you think he will end up back in Houston?
I mean, if you look, so you brought up some really good points. I mean, you bring up Detroit, right? You guess, I mean, and we think about, well, who manages Detroit? It'd be AJ Hinch, which we know they have a ton of success together. And, I think Hinch in that whole cheat gate, whatever you want to call it, I think while he might have been involved or knew, I think he more so didn't know that it continued. And I think he was ultimately kind of the scapegoat, and which to me is pretty bad when you think about, all the different things, all the players, this and that. But would he want a reunion there? Does he want maybe a different, change of scenery? And the Tigers are a young team. I mean, you got the reigning Cy Young, AL Cy Young, and Skubal, Tarek?
Yep. Seattle U, by the way.
Seattle U, I know that is one of the great things. And the guy stuck around for a while for it. I mean, he got drafted out of Seattle, correct? I don't think he left. I think he stuck around for 3 years, and then he was hurt 1 year. But so there's a lot of things in play. I would say that I would give it and this is probably a low ball number. I'd say it's at least a 75% probability he's back there. And just because of the fact that he hasn't gotten any more deals. We've seen reports where he said he regretted not taking it. So I'm going to say the floor of this is 75%. That's to me, you play some other factors, but I'm going to go with 75. And that might be very much lowballing it. And I'm going to call it out now. Hopefully it doesn't age, or does age. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go with 75. What about you?
No, that's, and you make some great points as well, talking through why you came to 75%. I'm going to go with 90. I know we talked about it the other day. I'm going to stick with that one. I'm going to stick with 90%. It does come down to loyalty versus money. And money does seem to be running everything. I think Bregman is at the point where, he's won his ring. Money is going to be close to the same. If you're making north of 100 million over 6-7 years. Can you buy your second gold yacht? I think those are the questions you start having at that point. So yeah, I think at that point he starts to bring in a little bit of loyalty, and I think there's a good chance that he ends up back where it's familiar, where he can hit a sport. Especially, he loves Crawford boxes. I'll tell you that much. He loves the Crawford boxes, and he loves hitting there. It is like hitting in Boston. So Boston could be a distant one. And AJ Hinch being a former manager, there could be that connection in Detroit. But yeah, colder weather. They are coming off of a pretty good run. So it is interesting to see where it lands. I am curious if the deal was the exact same, if it was 189 over 7 years, all three teams, Red Sox, Detroit, and Houston, I would still say I think he ends up back in Houston. That would be my guess.
And I can say I'm confident that deal's off the table, just because if you look at their numbers, they were 244 in payroll they ended last year with. They're projected to be at 218. I don't think that's I think it's by design. I think they realize we don't want to be paying the luxury tax anymore. So if they can make a deal potentially that gets them, maybe again, I think the deal that's going to work with them, it's going to be, if they want long term, it's going to be a deferral, and it's going to be incentive laden. I think that's the only way that works out, just because if you see the pattern of what they've done. But it'll be curious to see what happens. And then beyond that, what the Mariners do or don't do.
Yeah. Yeah. The Mariners are really just waiting for the chips to fall. And I wish there was more to talk about with the Mariners. They've made, I think, a few minor transactions. I did want to point this out. This is a really cool. I retweeted Pint Size Analyze, another Mariner guy, and he's big in analytics. If you're not following him, please make sure to give him a follow. But the Mariners already had a Julio E. Rodriguez, so they have two Julio Rodriguez's in their system. They just went and got another Luis Castillo. I can't remember any time that an organization had four players, two same last names. That's got to be, and these are just crazy stats in baseball that you always try and point out, or you love when broadcasters point out. But we've got to be at least one of the first organizations to have two Luis Castillos and two Julio Rodriguez's. So I did want to make that a point, and thank you to Pint Size Analyze for putting that one out there. It's a pretty cool one. And that I want to segue into more Mariner baseball. We got a really cool topic to talk about, and then we're going to backload it with some suggestions, because it wasn't 100%. But Ichiro, my guy, Ichiro makes it into the Hall of Fame, and we couldn't be more happy. He was 100% deserving, not 99%, 100% deserving of getting into the Hall of Fame, and on year one. Kyle, what are your thoughts on everything that went down?
First off, I don't need to pull the stats to tell you, what Ichiro not only has done on a stat sheet, but I think he's done for Major League Baseball. I mean, you look at, before he had, made his mark on Major League Baseball, some of the, the overseas talent that came from that area was mostly pitchers. You look at Hideo Nomo, I think Channel Park.
Channel Park, yeah.
So mostly pitchers. There had never been anybody that was playing the field until Ichiro came. And when he came in and did what he did, while those two kind of started the pipeline, he blew this thing wide open. And I think, you look at what we have today, a Shohei Ohtani. I mean, that is a direct correlation to what Ichiro did. And it was a big deal for him. I mean, because again, it was the experiment. Can someone from those leagues come over to Major League Baseball and perform? And his numbers say it alone. People could say there and go, well, he could have done more. Sure, you go watch batting practice and the guy could hit, upper deck home runs that, you thought at a whim, but you can't discredit what that individual did, where he did it at, and for the longevity in which he did it at. And so yeah, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest right fielders of all time. He's one of the best left-handed hitters of all time, especially when you talk about pure ball, bat to ball skills. I mean, I think some of these it's unheard of in some cases. And then you add the speed, size, which he was a small individual, but had an arm that you would think it was Bo Jackson throwing the ball. I mean, the guy was a unicorn. So thankful he got to spend his career, at least the majority of it, in Seattle. He gave us so many great memories, so deserving. And I hope the guy that, didn't vote him in, I do hope I saw the report that they did have a drink together. I sure hope Ichiro drank the dude under the table and did a Captain Morgan on top of him as a dude, don't F it with me ever again. But beyond that, he got in first ballot. And it's a Seattle helmet. I mean, we get sad there thinking about Randy. That was kind of where will he go? We know Ichiro's put Don in, he's done the S on there. And I can't, and honestly, from all the stories we've heard when he does get this, when he tells his stories, whether it's in English or not, I really hope his Hall of Fame speech is in English because I think the guy is a smart individual. He's funny. And I would love to be able to hear him speak that, and I can't wait to see him out there and get that jacket and well-deserved. And again, we can talk about these, so-called voters, how they are picked, but it well-deserved.
Yeah, and not to put a sour note on all this, because this is we do want to celebrate Ichiro getting into the Hall of Fame. That's an incredible feat, and we want to attack this from a positive angle, but it does lead into another conversation of the Hall of Fame and how it's set up with baseball writers, being at the helm of this and basically controlling the destiny of all these players. Now, I have my take on it, and I'm not against baseball writers because there's great baseball writers out there that absolutely 100% they deserve to be a part of this committee and get guys in. But I'm curious, is there a better way that we can do this to where we have former players like an MLBPA, but of guys, of some caliber? Maybe they had some sort of tenure in the MLB that could be a part of this, selection committee. And maybe we have half writers and half MLB players and ex MLB managers. What's your take on that part?
So without having to sit here and look up, how to be a Hall of Fame voter, I definitely think there needs to be potentially a revamp of who is deemed worthy for the vote. Again, there's 394 votes. Does it need to be that many? I don't know. But beyond that, we're looking at, what is it? Out of the 346 Hall of Famers that have been inducted since 1939, we've got one individual that was unanimous. Mariano Rivera, which 100% deserved. But we look at other people. I mean, like Ken Griffey Jr., again, one vote away. What was he? Top five in home runs, right? I think he's roughly top five in home runs. Just some of these things. And again, that's just from the, looking at a Seattle perspective. You got Edgar Martinez that took 10 years to get in, yet the DH award is named after him. You think about it, right? Like if Mariano Rivera is the only person that was unanimously voted, well, then think about all the other people that didn't. Babe Ruth. We can go. There's a huge one, right? And go on. So are you telling me, and whenever Shohei retires, that they're not going to give him 100%? Based on this, who knows? I feel like the Mariano year, there was just such pressure to get someone 100% in that they did it. But to me, I just don't get why someone would be like, what, I'm gonna poo-poo on someone's parade and not vote them in just because I spitefully not want there to be 100%. And I think that is a total disservice to baseball. And it's not like we're voting. We're not voting just anybody in, right? Again, 1939, 346 people. It's not easy to get in. And I'm not saying we need to make it easier to get into the Hall of Fame, but I think we need to relook at who actually gets to vote on it. And beyond that, I did see, I think it was Chipper Jones that had kind of made a point of, hey, you've got, he said 75. It's what I'm seeing is 67 living members. I don't think any of them have a vote, or at least don't have a committee to be like, hey, we need to look at this. I mean, I know Chipper was talking about Andrew Jones, who I think if you look at his stats is very much worthy of getting in there. I mean, you think about the NFL, and I think the NFL does a great job of having that it's like a committee for kind of the people that are 25 plus years after the fact. And they're, it was Easley for the Seahawks. He was a guy that was injured a lot, but like, I think it was his first 5-6 years in the NFL. He was a 6-time All-Pro. And then I think the last 4 or 5 years were just injury, but he's still effective, but you can't, it's, he didn't have enough longevity, this or that. It's like, but when the guy was healthy, he was the best defender in the NFL, and you can't discredit what they do. Again, it's what they do in the NFL. It shouldn't be stats. It should be what you think of them going, yeah, when that guy was on the field, nothing was getting past him. And if it did get past him, you will feel it later on. And
it's the external factors, right? Like Cam Chancellor. I know we're getting a little off topic, but still Seattle. Cam Chancellor, right? Like, didn't have the longest career. Doug Baldwin didn't have the longest career. Marshawn Lynch didn't have necessarily the longest career, but also for a running back, he put in some time, and then he even made a comeback. So yeah, there's definitely a lot with that. Chipper Jones made a great he made a great case for Andrew Jones. And that does open the door in the next potential CBA for this to be, how can we make this better? And it's not necessarily taking the rights away from the baseball writers, but I think that there should be at least some give and take with this, and just kind of being able to make this a little bit more as efficient as possible. The guy got in, and that's the most important part, but he's a unanimous Hall of Famer, and we all know it. And for one guy to not do that, I did want to do a stat correction. You mentioned with Griffey, there was 1 vote. It is actually 3.
There's 3.
He that we need to just, hey man, what's your reasoning? And so with that, I know we talked a little bit earlier about how can we improve this from the baseball writer's standpoint. And I think this should kind of go across the board with, if you now change it to former players and players that are in the Hall of Fame also getting a vote, I think it should be, I think it should come with the list, and then also a reasoning, why or why not. It should come with a reasoning. And it should come with the reasoning why or why not. If you didn't vote for Ichiro, there should be a reasoning why not, as well. Even if that reasoning is, hey, I like the guy, not voting for him this year because there's just a couple other guys I wanted to vote for. I'm going to get around to him next year, or something along those lines. Even if it's just saying, hey, I'm going to kick it up the stream. Like Felix Hernandez was probably one of those guys that hopefully he gets in down the road. There's a lot of arguments on both sides, but I'm really hoping, just as a biased Mariners fan, I'm hoping that he has enough. I think if he was on, a little off topic, but I think if he was on, one of those teams, the Cardinals or the Yankees or even the Dodgers throughout his tenure, I think he puts up the numbers that make you go, wow. I think Seager's kind of in the same boat as well. But it is what it is, and you have to live with what you have to live with. But he was an absolute legend for the time that he was here.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point of like having them, essentially explain. And now, while I don't think they need to explain in the moment, I think, or better yet, if you get 10 votes, you explain exactly why you're voting for those 10 people. But what I would say is, when the voting comes out and we see the numbers, right, for these people that are at, let's just say they're 98% and higher, you need to explain, and they weren't on your ballot, you need to explain why. Because if 98+% of the voters are voting for this person and you're not, why? What was your reasoning? So it's more after the fact. And but to me though, it would be, hey, until we're not, so we get the results, but before we decide what we're going to say, hey, you're in the Hall of Fame, but at what percentage? we need to vet why you did it. And if it's not a justifiable reason, quite frankly, we're kicking your vote out. Like, we're not like, and so instead of being 393 out of 394, we're going to be 393 out of 393 or 392 out of 392 and so on, because you didn't give a legit statistical reason of why you didn't select that person. Because if it's like, well, I wanted to vote for others, okay, well then why did you vote for this person over this person? And, and to me, that is how, and if you see a trend, or what you do is you say, you know what, these will be made public. You're a sports writer. Everything you do is an opinion based. You have your stats or whatever, but you publish it. You throw your name on it. Why don't we just throw your name on this, and then you can speak to the masses? Because I think that's what happens. We have these people that are hiding behind the anonymous take of the voting, and they can go, you know what, I had a bad day, or you killed my Yankees, so you know what, screw you, I'm not voting you in.
Yeah.
And
and it could be any number of reasons, right? And we don't know if it's biased or unbiased. I would like to think that most of them are unbiased, but it's also a reason that I don't vote. If I got my vote, yeah, I'm voting Felix. And I'm trying to throw every stat that I possibly can, and even talking through what if scenarios, like I just did with, if he was on this team, darn well he's getting in, because the stats that he's going to produce. That's the caliber of player that he was. The stats, the wins, right? The win total. I think he won a Cy Young, and he had, I think it was a 12-11 record. It was either a losing record or it was either a losing record or it was close to 500. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's one of those things where, if he was on any other team, he's probably putting up close to 20 wins, or a competitive team, I should say. Because if he was on the Rays back then, which is the one team he got a perfect game on. By the way, fun fact, Felix Hernandez threw a perfect game on my birthday. That was pretty cool. Had to kind of address that. So that was pretty cool. I was not at the game. I was actually visiting my friend in San Francisco, and I was on my way back to college. I was going to New Mexico Highlands at the time, and my friend lived in San Francisco, and we were at the Giants game that day, which was pretty cool. And they were playing Felix up on there, saying, "Oh, hey, he's this close to a perfect game," and just throwing it up on the big screen. That was really cool. But yeah, Kyle, there could be so many different ways to kind of improve this. And you know what? This is one I want to dig deeper in as we kind of throw these episodes down the road and everything. But from all the topics that we were able to cover today, what are your final thoughts?
Money runs sports. I wish my team had more to spend. I wish my team got more creative in how they spent it. And I wish we could take bias out of sports. I mean, at the end of the day, I wish we looked at the product, we looked at what they did, and you could look at it from a completely unbiased lens. I think, and that's in kind of all aspects of sports. You talk about, the broadcasting of sports. You look, and like, for example, what was it last year? I think ESPN, one game on ESPN, Sunday Night Baseball, one game. And to me, it's like, well, ESPN, you're supposed to be this global company, yet every Sunday night it's either the Astros or it's LA or it's New York or it's Boston, like whoever they happen to be playing. And to me, there's got to be a bias there, right? I mean, you're based out of Connecticut, so you're looking at those teams. I mean, minus LA, but LA is so big, they're everywhere. But to me, I wish we could see a little bit less bias when it comes to the broadcasting or just viewership of baseball. There's so much to talk about on it, and I wish there was just more ability for teams, smaller markets, like, make sure everyone gets on Sunday Night Baseball. Make sure the Rays get on there. They've got the Orioles, the Chicago White Sox. I know they've been not the greatest franchise, but you know what? They've also been a really good franchise. And so to me, it's the viewership that gets people in the stands. That's how you make your money. And when you've got, right now with all the different networks going bankrupt or this or that, or move into more premium services. So you got to pay more to see it when it's your local team. It should be on local television. Like, I want to see the young kid be able to go flip that channel on, look at the first 13 channels on your TV, just like we grew up doing, and be like, there's your game, find your favorite player, and, you start creating that relationship with that team. Hey, can we go see a game? And then it's the family affair to get in there. And I just think there's a little bit lost on that. I think it's just because of the money and just kind of bias. And so I would love to see some of that be kind of cast aside and get back to kind of what the love of baseball is. And it's just, the love of baseball to me in a way is conditional, and it's a bummer.
Yeah. And I remember them talking about it when it happened, talking about the Sunday Night Baseball in Seattle this past year. It was the first time since 2004, 20 years since they had Sunday Night Baseball. Now, while I don't agree wholeheartedly that every team should get a Sunday Night Baseball, maybe a team like the Marlins that's tanking, or a team like the White Sox that's tanking, maybe they don't get a Sunday Night Baseball that year. It should be kind of spread around a little bit. At least a little bit more than what it is.
Put them at the beginning of the year then. Like, at least, like, check a box. But get them at the beginning of the year to say we did.
Yeah. But yeah, try and find those matchups, even if it's in division, even if it's not in division. But a team that's at least 500 should probably get a Sunday Night Baseball. That's my take on that, is you should probably keep it somewhere relative to that, and kind of stay with that, even though you got season ticket holders and everybody's got their calendars. Well, we do the same thing in football, right? In football, they elevate some games to Sunday Night Football.
Mm-hmm.
There's been that a lot, and it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen more often than I can remember. But it does happen a lot. You can do the same thing in baseball. It can be done. I think it should be highlighted. I agree. I agree that it should be something that it attracts more people to the game, and it's bigger for the city. It may not be the monumental, right? It's not the World Series. It's not postseason baseball, but it is Sunday Night Baseball, and it does get more viewership, and it does help out that market and that team. So yeah, overall, I agree with that sentiment, and I think that should be something that they move forward, at least taking another harder look. Speaking on Bregman's potential return to the Astros, I'm hoping he doesn't. I'm hoping it's one of the other teams. If I had to narrow it down to three, we talked about them earlier. It's the Astros, it's the Tigers, and it's the Red Sox. Those are the three teams I think he will land on, with probably the most potential with the Astros. And then just wrapping it up with Ichiro, the Hall of Fame. Cannot be more excited for the guy. And I couldn't be more excited that he is a part of the Mariners, and he has been since he was retired. It's so cool to see him out there still, doing it. He's in his Pete Carroll era. He's out there still playing the game, doing what he loves, and still able to teach the guys and play with them as they're getting prepped for their game. Kyle, it's been a heck of a day. For Up West Sports, I'm Gavin Height. That's Kyle Knowles. Just remember, life's too short. Gas up your boys.